because we constructed, let's say, Oriental men in in certain terms, in gender terms, and Oriental women in gender terms as well. So also in terms of sexuality, we constructed them as perverse, polygamous, men as violent, and so on. If you go to early Orientalist, Hollywood Orientalist movies, you get a good sense of how we constructed, Muslim men and Muslim women, like Muslim women as or Middle Eastern women as women who are spending a lot of time in their harems and they are enjoying life, and then men as violent and raping women naturally, and so on and so forth. So there are lots of all these movies. The character of Sheikh is basically depicting those ideas about the Orient. The discourse of gender is central to the discourse of Orientalism. For example, the whole ideas of veiled woman is very central in Orientalist discourse, or the idea of harem as a space, as this place of this fantasy place where all kinds of sexualities take place. It became a fantasy, an imaginary trope. So they were very powerful, and they're still very powerful, and they're still, maybe they have changed, their meaning has changed, they're new forms of Orientalism, right? But there are still powerful ideas, powerful images, powerful stories. There are also a huge literature that is playing with the same kind of, tropes. So the trope of slavery, the trope of perverse sexuality, trope of polygamy. Right now the tropes have changed. Now we are depicting Arab men as this terrorist other, right? Most of the recent Hollywood movies, you have various terrorists that are being collapsed with the idea of Arabs and Muslims. So it's just the tropes have changed, but they're still kind of very much at work in our public, in our world of representation. The image of a veiled woman as a passive victim is very old. Actually, it emerged within the context of colonialism. And the language of civilizational imperialism or civilizing mission or mission civilisatrice is invested with meaning around veiled woman, Muslim veiled woman as a victim of horrible patriarchal relations. And our association with the image is with the image of it's really with a trope that is about passive victims. And in the US society, we're still associating a veiled woman with somebody who doesn't have a choice, who's not politically active, who's unable to negotiate her situation, who's unaware of her rights. And that, the evidence goes against that many, many women during the Iranian Revolution chose to veil themselves, even though in Iran, veiling after the establishment of the Islamic Republic was imposed by the state. And there are many women who dislike or disagree with that. But also many women chose to veil themselves for various reasons, And also veiling is a form of fashion right now, right? It's many women choose between different kinds of veiling as a form of fashion. It's just our idea of veiling as this one single image is very problematic, right? Because if you ask people who veil themselves or the history of veiling within the context of Muslim countries, you come across a diversity of experiences, a diversity of historical context, various forms of nation states and so on. It's not a simple thing. Like basically dressing, clothing, fashion, so on are very socioculturally constructed, right? So why we are wearing uniforms when you go to a job interview? Why we, what is the significance of, jeans in American popular culture? So clothing is a site of cultural and social and economic also meanings and relations. Before the Iranian Revolution, many religious Muslim families had concerns about their daughters going out, going to the public places, going to university, driving a taxi, or because of the dress code. They felt like that was not following the modesty code that they believed in. But after the revolution, many of these women said, there is no reason for us to not go on the street. I think there were women who were, as I said, that were very supportive of veiling, right? Participating in the revolution, veiled themselves, so on. And there were women who were against it. And those who were against it tried to resist as much as they could, right? After the imposition of the veil in Iran, there was a huge demonstration by women who disagreed with the decision with the state decision. So also women negotiated well in many circumstances, right? And they're still negotiating it. They're still negotiating, what kind of fashion is acceptable or not acceptable, and so on. There's always a little kind of, there are transgressive acts of being modest in Iran, which is really interesting. But it's also, again, as I said, clothing is a form of socio-political act. So in that sense, even here, we are negotiating it, right? We are negotiating it. There were a few transgender activists who went to Ayatollah Khomeini and asked about the situation of being a Muslim and being a transgender. And then he gave a fatwa and said that you could get a surgery. And that was a huge, not all clergy people agreed with Ayatollah Khomeini's fatwa, because some of them would say that this is not permitted. But this was, he gave actually a fatwa and enabled a number of people who were identifying as transgenders to register and to transit. So it is a situation that doesn't resolve the whole thing, because some people are arguing that this is cool. It's very, you can't live as a transgender. You have to just either change your gender to male or female. There is still gender binary at work. But on the other hand, I think many transgender activists who want to transit or to change, to do sex change, they got funding, they got support from the state to go for that. So it's an interesting situation. We should actually contextualize gender relations within the context of history again, because gender vocabulary, gender roles, what we expected, different forms of masculinity and femininity, there are certain meanings and definitions that emerged within the context of modernity, and unless we understand that historically, the genealogy of this gender terms, its history, its implication for political citizenship, its implication for the formation of a revolutionary subject, and post-revolutionary situation, we won't be able to understand, the Iranian Revolution of 1979. So I think what we have forgotten is the history of colonial modernity and how it impacted Iranian politics, and not only Iranian politics, but also the formation and establishment of a nation state in Iran and the whole ideology of modernization in Iran. Also, I think that form of forgetting has impacted significantly the history of various coups d'etats in Iran that was done by the intervention of colonial powers and provoked a lot of resentment and a lot of opposition among various groups of people in Iran. I think the history of Iranian modernity and its relationship with colonial modernity needs to be revisited for people to understand better the formation of an Islamic subject during the time of revolution.